Hello, Kirsten. Welcome to the summit. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to dive in. You have such a great perspective as both an author yourself and as a book editor. So we will talk about just how to help authors find like their dream book editor. I think this is such an important topic, and there's so much online about it. I think we can like get so overwhelmed going down just like the Google hole. And it can just be like, I don't even know where to start. So I just think having your perspective is going to be so great. So let me just read your bio for people who might not know you yet. So, residing in beautiful British Columbia, Canada, Kirsten McNeill is a full service book editor, multi genre author, podcaster, and creative mentor. In the summer of 2021, she established Worthy Writers Editing, a business and brand expressing her mission statement of increasing confidence and empowerment in everyone. Her community of talented friends and family inspires her to share knowledge, positivity, and guidance for others on their creative journeys. And I just always love seeing your social media posts. They're so inspiring and helpful. So, really excited to have your time today. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. That means a lot.
Yes. So, let's just kind of get started diving in. Maybe we could talk about, I guess, like if an author is listening to this and they're thinking, I really feel like maybe I want a book editor, but like I'm not quite sure what that relationship looks like. And like, what does a book editor even do? Like, how do I know if that's something I need? Do you want to kind of just explain a little bit, like as a book editor, what your job is, what you do, and how you help authors put their best book forward?
Yeah, so my job is basically to help the author build their book, elevate their book beyond what they can do by themselves. Of course, there's so much that you put into it as the writer. It's your baby, basically. You know, you've put so much heart and soul into creating this. So sometimes handing it off to somebody else can be kind of scary. So that's why I like to call the editor-writer relationship a partnership. It's not just you coming to me saying, okay, what do I do now? How do I fix it? It's me reading your book, understanding your vision for that book, and offering suggestions that can really help you take it to the next level, make sure everything's clear with the storyline, your characters make sense. And that's like the top level of developmental with, the characters and the plot, pacing, all that stuff. And then, you move on to like the more technical side with, word choice, structure. So there's a lot of different pieces to it, a few different editing types. And it's just nice to, find an editor who can really understand what you're trying to go for, someone who's maybe not afraid to kind of push you a little bit, not necessarily in a mean way, of course. Like obviously I want to have compassion, especially being a writer myself. It's hard to get that criticism and you just want to automatically fight against it, or at least that's my experience. Sometimes you're just like, no, it's perfect how it is. But it's nice to just come in as an editor, be an objective party that just can kind of look at the big picture, see different avenues where, the potential for the path that the writer can take. So it's really just offering suggestions, starting a conversation. Maybe, there might be a comment I make that a writer may need some clarity on. So, it's that give and take. It's not just like, I write all my comments and give it back to you and never hear from me again, right? It's that
Mhm.
open partnership of, just that collaboration, and, just making suggestions that could potentially elevate your story, make things more clear, make things more entertaining. And of course, I always like to say, you don't have to accept every edit suggestion that your editor makes. But of course, if you're not accepting any edit suggestion that they make, then why are they your editor? So it's kind of that fine balance of, listen to the objective party, but also kind of make that choice for yourself.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that as a partnership. I think that's so true. And I think sometimes where we as authors maybe get ourselves into a pickle is if we, like you're saying, just hand something over to the editor and then step away from it, almost like we're not going to have any part in it, or if it's like we're holding it too close and we're maybe handing it to the editor, but not really, because like you're saying, we're being defensive and don't want to make any changes. So I love how you describe it as like a balance of getting, I think it's so valuable to have an editor because we're often so close to our books, especially when we get to the point where we've finished the book, we've been journeying with it for a long time. And so it's like we don't have that objectivity anymore. So being able to give it to this person with to approach it with this like fresh set of, you know, fresh eyes and a fresh perspective and really help us gain that fresh perspective on our book as well. I know for me, I've gotten edits that have just helped me, like, I guess, just kind of lift the veil and like see new possibilities for my book, which I think can be hard sometimes when we're so in it. So I just love the way that you describe that as a partnership. Maybe you can talk a little bit about if there's a writer who, after listening to this, they're like, okay, after what Kirsten's saying, I think I want to hire an editor. Like, I feel like this is definitely something that I need. So now where do I start and how do I make sure that an editor I find is like the right fit for me? Do you have any tips for someone, not just finding any editor, but like really finding their dream editor for their book baby?
Yeah, I think with research like this, it's important to limit yourself as well. Because I don't know about you, but with me, when I start research, like I want to do everything. Like there's like so much out there. Like I have to make sure I analyze everything. But you'll drive yourself crazy if you keep, down that rabbit hole, right? So I think it's important to limit, like, say, 3 editors you're gonna kind of look into,
Mhm.
and then from there you can kind of decide, okay, this one is a better fit for me. So when you're doing that research stage, because I think it's important to kind of do a little bit of that background work first before, say, you like reach out to them in like a DM or something like that. Just then you
Mhm.
already have an idea of who they are, what kind of content they put out, and then you're not like wasting your time messaging all these people and just trying to figure things out that way. You kind of already set the way to figure out who's going to be the best fit. So social media is a great way to look at that. Instagram, Facebook, maybe even LinkedIn, just to see who's out there, what kind of content do they put out. Do you resonate with this content? Is it helpful? Does it inspire you, entertain you, things like that? um and then, of course, if you have writer friends who have a recommendation and who they use, you can kind of backtrack from there as well. And then websites are a great thing to look at as well. It's
Mhm.
not the be all end all, I would say. Like if someone doesn't have a website, it's not like, oh, they're not the good editor, because social media is so important to our society now that it's just like, if they just have an Instagram or Facebook, like that doesn't mean their work is going to be any less than somebody that does have a website or something, right? So it's just kind of those extra resources to get to know the editor, and then you can kind of decide, like, okay, who feels good, who do I connect with the most, who do I really want to chat with? Because like I said, it's a partnership, so it's really important to kind of build that relationship and not just like, okay, yes, I'm going to hire you and see how that works out, as opposed to putting a little bit of effort first, and just kind of finding who's going to be like communicative with you, who is going to be knowledgeable, answering your questions, being upfront about cost and turnaround time, and just that honesty there. So once you kind of put a little bit of research, you found a few editors that feel good to you, then you start reaching out to them, having a bit of a conversation, getting to know who they are. Most editors do like a sample edit, like I do a 1,500-word sample edit, just to kind of get to know the process that I do, and the kind of comments I leave and things like that.
Mhm.
And then sometimes you might be able to do like a video conversation, just to kind of get to know them face to face, over the internet, because there's so many options out there now and you can access so many different people. You kind of want to have that little bit of extra layer of comfortability and safety, and just getting to know them. So at that point, it's really just asking the question, like, do you have time for 15 minutes to talk with me, or just have like a voice recorder chat, or those voice clips that you can do on like Instagram DMs and stuff. So it's really just about knowing what questions you want to ask, and knowing what's important to you, the quality, the cost, the turnaround, and just really kind of weighing out um who's going to be the best fit for your book. And of course, genre is a thing too. So if the editor you talk to is an expert in like thriller and you write romance, maybe they're not the best fit for you.
Mhm.
I like to do, contemporary romance, thrillers, urban fantasy. So those are kind of my areas of expertise. So that's kind of another thing to look at too, of what they're going to be good at, what types of editing they have experience with. And typically you can find testimonials as well, whether it's on a website or in like a highlight reel on Instagram. So there's lots of ways you can get to know the editor before you've even talked to them. And then you kind of
Mhm.
narrow it down and then see who you want to chat with, who's a good fit. A lot of it just kind of comes down to instinct too, like who do you click with basically, and who's gonna, protect your manuscript while also pushing it to the next level.
Hmm. I love how you describe that process. And I think you give so much permission to really like take your time with this process and like you're saying, really trust your instincts, but also like not to feel like you have to rush it. I love all the different like steps that you lay out that authors can and should do, both like to do their research beforehand, but I think also it's so true, like taking the time to ask if you can hop on a call just to get to like meet with someone, or sending those voice memos and getting that sample, those 1,500 words or whatever it is for like the sample edits, and just really like that you just give so much permission that like it's okay to take your time, like it's okay to ask to meet the editor, before going with them. It's okay to ask for like a sample. I think like you're saying, this is such a big decision and you want to find someone that it's like you connect with their skills as an editor, and then also you feel comfortable with them and you feel safe with them because you want to be able to ask questions and be part of that whole process. I just love the permission that you give there. And I think I probably should have asked this question earlier, but it came out to me now. Maybe you can just really briefly, you mentioned briefly before kind of like the different levels of editing. Do you want to just go through that really briefly in case there's someone who's listening who feels like they maybe don't quite know those terms yet or kind of know what those different levels are? And I know some people, like I think you offer like all of those levels, that you'll do all of it, but then there are some editors that are more just copy editors or more just proofreaders. So do you want to just explain that briefly? I think that's an important piece.
Yeah, so the first level is developmental. So I think I mentioned like plot, pacing, characters is kind of how I break it down. That's kind of like the what's happening in your story. You want to make sure everything flows well, and the character arcs are working how you want them to. So that's really the biggest piece of editing, because when you've put your drafts together, typically you want to do a few of your own drafts by yourself before you like hand it off to an editor. If it's a first draft, there's going to be tons of things that you're going to want to work on, so it's kind of not making the most of the editor. So you really want to put it to bring the manuscript to the highest point that you can bring it yourself, and then kind of hand it off for
Mhm.
developmental editing with an editor. So that's kind of the plot, the characters, and kind of the heart of the story. And then the second stage is copy and line editing. Now, some editors separate copy editing and line editing, but I think that they go so well hand in hand together that I just put them together. Um, and that's really how you're telling the story. So sentence structure, word choice, just how the flow of the story is coming along and everything's making sense and clear, and you're not repeating too much stuff, where you can just kind of, it's like that info dumping versus just kind of moving along with the story, that kind of balance there. And then of course the final stage is proofreading. So that's like that final check before things go off to print. And then of course in between there you can use like beta readers, ARC readers, all that kind of stuff to help you along. But I always say that it's really important to do all three stages of editing. But of course, I do understand with especially self-published authors, it can be hard to, afford that cost and everything. So I think it really just depends on, what you're good at, and what you want to hire an editor for. So it's
Mhm.
finding that balance of what works for you and your budget along the process. Like I
Mhm.
said, especially for self-published authors who don't really have access to a lot of that with maybe more traditional publishing. Um, and I do offer manuscript critique as well. So that's kind of any point along the way, really, if there's something you're stuck with, or you just kind of want to figure out, which direction you want to head, that can kind of offer some strengths and areas of improvement that you can find. Yeah.
That's a great summary. And I think that's also helpful because often a lot of us, when we grow up in school and we get, edits on our papers or something from our teachers, I think often it's really kind of that last stage, more of like the proofreading when we think about, oh, punctuation or grammar or like spelling mistakes. And I think just explaining that a good editor can help you with so much more than that, like you're saying, really partner with you with your content, with how you're telling the story, the structure, and then going into, like you're saying, the flow. I think flow is something a lot of my clients will ask me about, like pacing. How do I know that the pacing is right, the flow is right, sentence structure? We all tend to have words that we just repeat a lot, that we overuse, and it can be hard to see ourselves. So I think I love how you broke that down into kind of the three main stages. Now it's so helpful to have an editor for all of those. Just my last question before we get into sharing how people can connect with you and get your more of your goodness is just thinking about some of your like favorite clients that you've had who have hired you to be their editor. Like, are there any things that you feel like is just so important for authors to do kind of from the author side to help that relationship be a success?
Yeah, I think it's really important to set expectations before you start the project. So, of course, turnaround time, like how long it takes the editor to work on it, how often you want updates. Like I worked with one client who wanted me to send my edits back every week. Some authors decide that they don't want to see it until I'm absolutely finished with it. So knowing what they expect from you and what you expect from them is a really good conversation to have. So just with updates, what that means is it just email? Do you meet over Zoom? Do you DM each other? So it's really good to have that conversation and to know kind of the schedule that's really important to have. For me, it's very important to communicate whether I have very little to say or not. I know what it's like to send something off to an editor or someone you're working with and you don't hear from them until the deadline, and it's just like that anxiety builds up, like, okay, what's going on, what's happening here. So communication is really important to me. So having a contract at the beginning of the project that lays out everything, timeline, cost, expectations, what I'm working on, and then I usually like to provide weekly email updates just to make sure that they know that I'm still working on it. I'm still thinking about them. Like I haven't just disappeared forever. So that's really important, especially with the online world. You just never know sometimes. So it's good to just have that conversation, have the expectations. Don't be afraid to, like, if you're the writer, don't be afraid to ask questions, ask for updates. Like I'd rather you message me like 3 times a week, checking in, as opposed to, just sitting there anxious waiting for me to reach out to you, right? So it's important just to have that conversation, because every writer is going to be different of what they want and need. So it's really good just to lay that all out in the beginning, and then everybody kind of knows what's going on. And if things need to tweak along the way, life happens. There might be a delay on my end, there might be a delay on their end for, like, say, payment or something. Like just be honest and have that conversation. Like I'm usually pretty flexible with things are going on, because I've built those relationships with my clients, and I know what it's like to be a writer. So it's nice to just have that honest conversation and just kind of tweak things as you go along, because like I said, life happens and you just kind of have to go with the flow to an extent, right?
Yes, I love that. And that's such great advice. I mean, I think with everything, but especially this relationship, just to really have that communication, and for authors not to be afraid of asking for more communication. I think sometimes we worry like, oh, am I bothering them? But like you're saying, you would much rather hear questions than to just have your client be like stewing in anxiety. So I think that's such a good point. Well, I know we've just kind of hit like the tip of the iceberg, and you share so many more wonderful tips on your social media. You also have a wonderful email sequence with some of your best editing tips. So do you want to share for your free gift for that email sequence, what's the best ways for people to access that, I'll also include the links below. And then where can everyone find you online?
Yeah, so I mostly hang out on Instagram, editor.kirsten. You'll find me. My website, of course, is worthywriters.ca. Worthywriters.ca // contact. You can find my newsletter sign up. You'll get this 8 email sequence. The first few emails have a few of my main tips for self-editing, especially before you send it off to an editor. It's just some things that I've noticed that are common themes that a lot of authors might deal with. So it's nice to just kind of have that compiled and give you a good sense of kind of the main things to look out for before you send it off to your editor. And I also have a indie author reading list that I put together. You can submit your book just to have on that list that goes out to all my newsletter subscribers. So you can, find new books. Maybe someone will find your book as well, and you'll get some new readers. It's just nice to have that community and to build on that Worthy Writers brand. And yeah, those are the main places to find me. I'm usually around, usually answer pretty quickly. So it's nice to connect with other writers, even if you just want to say hi and chat for a bit.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. I love your content so much. I love your tips, and just thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today with the summit. It's such a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to join in. This is really exciting.